It was November 1872 when a British merchant ship left New York City, destined for Gibraltar. While crossing the icy waters of the North Atlantic, the crew spotted a phantom-like silhouette on the horizon. The Mary Celeste, a twin-masted ship, eerily adrift at sea without a soul in sight. With a growing sense of dread, the British crew boarded the abandoned ship, only to be met with unnerving silence. The Mary Celeste was in perfect condition, sails set, cargo secure, provisions untouched. In the captain's quarters, a half-written logbook hinted to a routine voyage while uneaten meals lay abandoned on the tables. It was a ghost ship. The lifeboat was gone, and 10 of the people who had been aboard had vanished as if spirited away. There was no signs of a struggle, no blood, no clues, and the crew had never been heard from again, rendering the Mary Celeste as one of maritime history's most enduring mysteries. To this day, ghost ships, or ghost boats, still drift across oceans around the world, each carrying its own unique and haunting tale. Sometimes, clues help us piece together what had happened to the ships like this. Other times, the ocean guards its secrets, leaving us with only unanswered questions. Well, in the fall of 2007, the charter fishing boat, Joe Cool, was found adrift in the Atlantic, over 150 miles off course, just north of Cuba. And strangely, all 6 passengers and crew members were missing. The gas tanks were empty, but the boat itself was fine. Its radio, navigation system, and emergency beacon were all operational. Yet no distress signal had been sent, no radio communication received. But unlike the Mary Celeste, on board, there were signs that something foul had happened. The cabin was in complete disarray, as if the occupants had fled in a panic, with 4 spent shell casings from a 9mm pistol and blood on the stern. Theories abounded, but none could fully explain the grim scene. It seemed no one would ever know what terrible events had unfolded aboard the Joe Cool. And no one would ever know, unless, of course, there were survivors who could tell the tale. Join me now as we delve into the strange case of the Joe Cool murders. You'll hear how a crime scene aboard an abandoned fishing boat told a gruesome tale of murder, and the harrowing details of a high-seas hijacking revealed by 2 survivors found floating in a life raft. Only something wasn't adding up about their story. For as long as anyone could remember, 27-year-old Jake Brenham seemed destined to be a boat captain. Growing up in Miami, Jake spent every possible moment on the water with his half-brother Scott Gamble. While Scott gravitated towards sailing, Jake's true passion was fishing. Their grandparents' $5 million mansion on Miami's exclusive Star Island, nestled in Biscayne Bay, was the perfect setting for their aquatic adventures. Conveniently located just a mile from the world-famous Miami Beach Marina, Jake would often ride his bike there, spending his free time fishing and mingling with the charter fishermen. He started young, working as a bait cutter, then as a mate on charter trips, learning the trade from experienced captains who took him under their wing. By 18, Jake had his own captain's license and became known for finding the best fishing spots. His second job was at a sea towing company in Miami Beach, earning him high praise from his boss, who once described him as one of the best captains they'd ever seen. His fearless nature demonstrated when he rushed out at 3 a.m. one morning to salvage a sinking 200-foot freighter. But beyond his skills at the helm, there was always something else about Jake the other captains noticed. He never let his family's wealth get in the way of his remarkable work ethic. Although he may have been born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he never served himself with it. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before Jake would have a boat of his own, and that moment finally arrived in fall of 2006. With his grandfather's help, Jake purchased a 47-foot Buddy Davis fishing yacht for $220,000 and named it Joe Cool in honor of his father, Joe Brenham, who tragically passed away earlier that year. That winter, Jake refurbished the boat, investing over $30,000 in new fishing equipment. By the spring, Joe Cool was ready to take his first clients out on the ocean, fulfilling Captain Jake's lifelong dream. On January 26, 2007, a cold winter's night in Batesville, Arkansas, Walmart employees eagerly awaited closing time. The assistant manager, a trusted employee, had started collecting cash from the registers, using a shopping cart to transport the trays to a secure room in the back for counting and safekeeping. Typically, a cashier would assist with this task for security reasons, but that night, the assistant manager sent the cashier home early. About 30 minutes later, he decided to clock out early as well. But before leaving, he bought a microwave oven using his employee discount and checked out around 10:30 p.m. After loading the box into his 1991 Dodge minivan and driving off, he sent his wife a text saying, "I really messed up. Remember, I love you." An hour later, after driving 90 miles, the assistant manager saw flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror and pulled over. Nervously, the Walmart employee rolled down his window, but was relieved when the officer merely ticketed him for a headlight being out. As he returned to the highway, the manager likely grinned, knowing how narrowly he'd escaped something far worse. Because he'd just stolen $92,000. Surveillance footage would later show that the man had used the microwave box to conceal and steal the cash unnoticed. After taking the box into the back room while he was alone, the assistant manager opened it and stuffed all the cash from the tills inside before resealing it like new. Getting away with the robbery was as simple as walking out the front door. State police were notified of the theft shortly after the manager received a ticket for the busted headlight. But nobody in Arkansas would ever see the assistant manager again, not even his wife. You know, success doesn't come easy, and it often doesn't rest on the shoulders of just one person. Like, take us for an example. We've got a team of amazing writers and researchers, an incredible editor, and possibly the best podcast producer in the business. So no, in case you wondered, it's not just me putting these episodes together. And it's the same for many successful commerce businesses. There's often a business behind the business that makes it possible. When you think about businesses with criminally good sales, like Death Wish Coffee or everyone's favorite murder mystery star, Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty, sure, you think about in-demand product, a premeditated brand, and scary good marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the business behind the business, making selling and buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet, and the not-so-secret secret. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in your feed, or whatever in between. Because businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Death Wish Coffee uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/madness, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/madness to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/madness. Now that Jake Brenham was the captain of his own boat, it was time to handpick his crew. And naturally, he chose his 35-year-old brother, Scott Gamble, to take on the role of mechanic and mate. Joining them was 27-year-old Sammy Carey, a close friend and marine biology graduate who served as first mate. On and off the water, the trio had a tight bond, often gathering at Jake's beach house on Star Island, where he lived with his wife Kelly and his 2 young children, Taylor and Morgan. And it didn't take long before the Joe Cool was already making headlines. Having only been in operation for a few months, it made the local paper in May 2007 after receiving an emergency SOS call from a sinking sailboat. The Joe Cool raced 10 miles across the open ocean, arriving just in time to rescue 6 passengers, including an infant child. Although the crew of the Joe Cool was just getting started in their brand new business, the future was looking bright, with many more adventures just around the corner. On September 21st, 2007, First Mate Sammy Carey was alone on the Joe Cool at the marina when 2 men approached him seeking a charter for the following day. The older man, who appeared to be ex-military or law enforcement, and his younger Cuban companion sought a one-way trip to the Bahamas and offered $4,000 in cash. They claimed to be marine surveyors who needed to reunite with their girlfriends at the Big Game Resort and Yacht Club on Bimini. They couldn't fly there because their girlfriends had accidentally packed their passports. Considering the trip would only take 2.5 hours one way, Sammy knew it was an opportunity to make an easy $4,000 and passed on Jake's phone number. The trip was scheduled for the following day. This was an exciting opportunity for the crew, their first international charter. Not only would it be a feather in their caps and likely boost future business, it would also give them a whole day to fish for yellowfin tuna on the way back from Bimini. Even Jake's wife Kelly was excited about the plan. Although she wouldn't normally join her husband on his fishing charters, the idea of a relaxing, carefree round trip to the Bahamas sounded appealing, and she arranged for her grandfather to look after the kids. On Saturday, September 22nd, the 2 men who requested the charter arrived at the Joe Cool around 3:15 p.m., carrying 6 black bags of luggage. After the crew helped load everything on board, the Joe Cool set sail, chartering a course due east for Bimini. The plan was to return the following day, and Jake's uncle, Jeff Branham, was sure to remind them of the importance of returning back on time, especially since they had an important charter booked for the Monday morning, requiring proper boat provisioning. On Sunday, September 23rd, Jeff Branham initially felt frustrated when the Joe Cool hadn't returned on time, especially since he'd been so clear about how important it was to get back home in time for the next scheduled charter. But that frustration soon turned to worry when by 4 p.m., the Joe Cool still hadn't returned, prompting him to report the boat as overdue to the U.S. Coast Guard. Although it was possible they'd just had some mechanical issues, or maybe had just lost track of time fishing, that possibility seemed less likely after the Coast Guard scoured the waters between Miami and Bimini and could find no sign of the missing vessel. Meanwhile, 150 miles south, a Coast Guard cutter detected an unidentified blip on its radar just before sunset. It was the Joe Cool adrift, only 30 miles off Cuba's coast. But when attempts to contact the boat went unanswered, they pulled up alongside the boat and the cutter blared its air horn, hoping to get a response from anyone below deck. But all that greeted them was ghostly silence. 4 Coast Guardsmen were then dispatched to board the vessel. It was immediately apparent that the Joe Cool had been completely abandoned. There wasn't a soul in sight. Thousands of dollars worth of expensive fishing equipment remained aboard, and the vessel appeared to be in perfect condition. No damage, no leaks, and nothing that might cause a crew to abandon a ship. But whatever had caused the passengers to leave appeared to have happened suddenly. because inside the cabin was a complete mess, with items haphazardly strewn about. Upon further inspection, they found the batteries dead and the fuel tanks empty, adding to the mystery. If the Joe Cool had run out of fuel between Miami and Bimini, the Gulf Stream current would have drifted the boat north at about 4 miles per hour, not south toward Cuba. It didn't make any sense. Using a generator to power the boat, the Coast Guard examined the ship's navigation system. The GPS showed that the Joe Cool had traveled in a perfectly straight line from Miami to just outside of Bimini, but then suddenly changed course and headed south in an erratic fashion. It also appeared that someone else may have been piloting the boat after its turn south, because the once straight lines of an experienced captain now appeared wobbly and much less skilled. While the cutter crew reported their findings to their supervisors, they noticed one thing that gave them hope for the missing passengers. The boat's life raft was missing. It was still very possible that everyone would be found safe and sound, floating somewhere on the ocean. But darkness was falling fast. Immediately, the Coast Guard dispatched helicopters, airplanes, and boats to search for the missing crew. At 7 a.m. on Monday, September 24th, a helicopter launched from the deck of the Coast Guard cutter Confidence to assist in a grid search for the missing boaters. After nearly an hour of flying, the helicopter crew spotted an orange life raft floating about 12 miles north of where the Joe Cool had been abandoned. Seeing the boat's name stenciled on the side of the raft, they immediately knew they'd found what they were looking for. A tarp covered the raft, and they prayed that all 6 passengers were safely inside. As the chopper hovered over the raft, the wind from the rotors blew away the tarp, revealing only 2 survivors inside. Using a rescue basket, the crew brought the survivors on board, along with several black bags of luggage. It was the 2 men who chartered the boat that they'd found. All 4 crew members were still missing. Amidst the noise of the chopper, the older man scribbled down what had happened. Hijacked, 4 killed. But the Coast Guard crew noticed the men weren't acting like typical rescuees. Instead of celebrating being found, they seemed somber, almost disappointed. It wouldn't be until the survivors were safely on board the Coast Guard cutter that they'd reveal the whole story. According to the survivors, the Joe Cool had responded to a distress signal from a disabled vessel near Bimini, only to be boarded and attacked by 3 Cuban hijackers armed with guns. After Jake and Kelly were shot, the hijackers then turned their guns on Scott and Sammy when they refused to throw their friends' bodies overboard. The surviving 2 men were then allegedly forced to pilot the boat south toward Cuba until it ran out of fuel, about 30 miles shy of their destination. The hijackers then apparently used the boat's radio to summon another vessel from Cuba to come pick them up. But before departing, the hijackers set the survivors adrift in a life raft with some of their belongings. It was nothing short of a miracle that the 2 men survived such a harrowing ordeal.
If you've ever looked into GLP-1 weight loss injections, then you know how expensive they are. We were first introduced to Ozempic when Tyler found out he had diabetes. And even though we have insurance, it doesn't cover the full amount, and even that's expensive. So when it came to me thinking about trying GLP-1 weight loss injections, there was no way we were going to even consider it at those costs until we found out about Levity, offering a compounded semaglutide solution, the same ingredient as Ozempic and Wegovy, for only $225 a month, helping you save 80% of the cost. Now, what we love about Levity is that they provide an evidence-based approach to weight management, providing you with the lifestyle support you need to achieve long-term weight loss, pairing the power of clinically proven medications with personalized support from a team of clinical experts to help you lose weight safely. Now, the amazing thing about effective GLP-1 treatment is that it can help you lose 15 to 20% of your weight in a year, with significant results from month 1. If you're unfamiliar with how GLP-1 weight loss injections work, they basically mimic natural gut hormones that signal your brain to reduce appetite, enhance metabolism, and improve digestion, which causes prolonged fullness and better nutrient absorption. By reducing food noise, those persistent thoughts about eating, GLP-1s can decrease snacking, overall food intake, and regulate blood sugar levels. So if you've been thinking about trying GLP-1 weight loss injections, but have been turned off by how expensive they are, or about how to do it safely, then I encourage you to check out Levity at joinlevity.com, offering Minds of Madness listeners, for a limited time, $175 for your first month. That's 80% less than other weight loss injections. Just go to joinlevity.com and use promo code MADNESS at checkout for this incredible offer. That's joinlevity.com, JOINLEVITY.com. Promo code MADNESS at checkout for $175 on your first month. We've also included a link in our show notes.
The Coast Guard cutter began towing the Joe Cool back to Miami as agents from the FBI were helicoptered on board to investigate the potential murder at sea. Some of the agents set about examining the crime scene, while others questioned the two survivors about what had taken place. The younger of the two survivors was 19-year-old Guillermo Zaragoza, a Cuban national who'd immigrated to the U.S. with his family 8 years earlier. Agents aboard the Joe Cool found Guillermo's ID card while collecting evidence and confirmed his identity. After moving to the U.S., Guillermo's family settled in Hialeah, a bustling Miami suburb known for its vibrant Cuban-American community. Guillermo was known within his neighborhood as a responsible, polite, and hardworking teenager, an excellent student with aspirations for a career in law enforcement, working as a security guard and interning with the famous Pinkerton investigation firm in Miami. The Pinkerton chief had even taken a special interest in Guillermo, grooming him to become a bona fide private investigator one day. In fact, just 4 days before he boarded the Joe Cool, Guillermo's application to join the Miami Police Department had been approved. The older survivor identified himself as 35-year-old Kirby Archer from Batesville, Arkansas. He was ex-military and served as an Army investigator stationed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba throughout the mid-90s. When he decided to leave the armed forces in 2003, he went AWOL and received an other-than-honorable discharge. Reluctantly, Kirby admitted to the agents that there was an active warrant out for his arrest. 9 months earlier, he'd stolen nearly $100,000 from a Walmart where he worked as an assistant manager. Before conducting official interviews with the two survivors, agents separated Guillermo from Kirby to make sure their stories wouldn't be influenced by each other. And initially, both men gave a similar account of the hijacking. But when pressed for details, the cracks in their story began to show, beginning with Kirby and Guillermo giving different descriptions of what the hijackers were wearing. Kirby claimed they wore shorts and t-shirts, while Guillermo said they wore jeans and polo shirts. They also had differing versions about where the crew members were murdered. Kirby claimed he'd been standing next to Kelly on the deck when she was shot, but Guillermo said Kirby wasn't even on the deck at the time. They also disagreed on how the bodies were disposed of, one claiming they were thrown over the side of the boat, while the other claimed they tossed them over the stern. Descriptions of the handguns used by the Cuban pirates also varied. To the agents, these discrepancies suggested a hastily constructed story the pair had likely concocted while floating aboard the life raft. The agents who were processing the crime scene aboard the Joe Cool also found evidence contradicting the survivors' version of events. Along with 3 spent shell casings from a 9mm handgun, human blood was discovered inside the boat's cabin, as well as on the stern, which disputed Kirby and Guillermo's claim that all 4 victims had been murdered on deck. They also discovered a small handcuff key near the boat's bow and another inside the men's bags. Guillermo's luggage contained unusual items for a last-minute vacation to Bimini, including a blowgun with darts and 2 knives. Inside Kirby's luggage, they found $2,200 in cash. The fact that Kirby was allowed to escape with thousands of dollars was a giant red flag. It raised the question of why pirates had hijacked the boat if not to steal valuable items. Instead, the pirates had apparently hijacked the boat, driven it 140 miles, and left without taking a single item of value. Nothing about the men's story made any logical sense. During Guillermo's interrogation, agents pointed at the Joe Cool, which was being towed by the cutter, and asked if he recognized the boat. And for some unknown reason, Guillermo said he didn't. When asked again, Guillermo doubled down and swore he'd never been aboard the Joe Cool. Not only had Guillermo already given his account of the hijacking, but investigators found his ID aboard the Joe Cool. Perhaps there was a language barrier, as English wasn't Guillermo's first language. Or perhaps he was traumatized and confused by everything that had happened. Nevertheless, Guillermo's response to this basic question allowed the FBI to arrest him for giving false statements to federal agents. Likewise, Kirby was also arrested on a charge of flight to avoid prosecution due to the active robbery warrant from the Walmart heist in Arkansas. At the very least, these charges would allow law enforcement to keep them in custody while they pursued their homicide investigation into what really happened between Miami, Bimini, and Cuba. Back in Miami, news spread quickly about the discovery of the Joe Cool and the alleged hijacking by pirates at sea. While it was true that pirates and smugglers had plagued the waters between Florida and Cuba throughout the 70s and 80s, this type of piracy had been virtually eradicated over the past 15 years or so. In cases where piracy still exists, the targets were almost always valuable cargo vessels, not chartered fishing boats. The Branham family declared that they didn't believe a word of what Kirby and Guillermo were saying. Instead, Jeff Branham told a reporter from the Miami Herald, "I think that Kirby Archer pirated our boat. Now, the best case scenario is they gave my nephew and the others aboard life jackets and told them to swim for it." Jake and Kelly's 2 small children were taken in by close relatives while the search for their parents got underway. Their infant son Morgan was far too young to realize anything was wrong. But Taylor, who was nearly 3, began asking when Mommy and Daddy were coming home. The Coast Guard spent the next 5 days in an all-out effort to find the missing crew. Using every available aircraft and boat, they grid-searched an area totaling 14,850 square miles. Not content to simply stand by helplessly, the Brenham family hired private helicopters to join the search as well. But the search was eventually called off, and the crew of the Joe Cool were officially presumed dead. On October 10, 2007, 18 days after the Joe Cool was found abandoned at sea, Federal U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta announced that Kirby Archer and Guillermo Zarabozo were being charged with murder of the 4 crew members. It would be the inconsistent and conflicting statements made by the suspects during questioning that would form the entire foundation of the highly circumstantial case against both Kirby and Guillermo. Circumstantial evidence included surveillance footage of Kirby and Guillermo inside a Miami gun store, showing the men purchasing 2 magazines for a 9mm handgun, the same caliber used aboard the Joe Cool. A search of Guillermo's home also revealed an empty lockbox for a handgun. If prosecutors were going to secure guilty verdicts, they knew they needed more information. Without hard evidence to prove the murders, they at least needed a compelling explanation for why the men would commit such a terrible and utterly senseless crime.
As I've gotten older, I've noticed my hair just doesn't grow back as fast as it used to. I also noticed I was shedding more, and the overall appearance of my hair was dull looking. And like many women, I began thinking this was just one more thing I was going to have to accept about getting older. Until I tried using Nutrafol, the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding. Since I started using Nutrafol at the beginning of this year, the results have been dramatic. My hair that once took forever to grow even an inch after I got a haircut, that was dull looking and brittle, is now thriving, shining, and growing at a rate similar to when I was in my 20s. On top of seeing these amazing results, what I also love about Nutrafol is that it's physician formulated with drug-free ingredients and supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning stress, like hormones, the environment, your nutrition, your lifestyle, even your metabolism, through whole body health. And because thinning hair is different for men and women, Nutrafol created multiple formulas tailored to give your hair what it needs to grow based on your biology, your life stage, such as postpartum or menopause, and lifestyle factors, such as plant-based lifestyles. And with Nutrafol, building a hair growth routine is simple. You just make your purchase online with no prescription or doctor's visits required. And free shipping and automated deliveries ensure you'll never miss a day, seeing results in 3 to 6 months. So don't resign yourself to thinking just because you're getting older, you have to accept having hair that's dull looking, that takes forever to grow back, and is constantly shedding. Instead, get results you can run your fingers through. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Minds of Madness listeners $10 off your first month subscription, plus free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter promo code MADNESS. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Just go to Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, and use promo code MADNESS. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code MADNESS. We've also included a link in our show notes.
Once investigators began seriously investigating Kirby Archer's past, they quickly established a plausible theory explaining his motives. Kirby's first run-in with the law occurred in 1993 when he was just 20 years old. At the time, he was dating a 15-year-old and had kept her out past curfew. For this, Kirby was convicted for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Kirby then joined the Army and stayed out of trouble for many years, marrying his first wife, Michelle Rowe, in 1998, and having 2 sons together. But within 5 years of being married, it all fell apart. According to court records, Kirby and Michelle's divorce included a number of unsettling accusations against him. Michelle claimed Kirby had cheated on her by having a relationship with a high school boy. She also claimed Kirby had impregnated his own niece. Although Kirby denied the allegations, it was later confirmed that his name was listed as the father on the birth certificate of his niece's child. In the wake of his divorce, Kirby married his second wife, also named Michelle. But the accusations of sexual deviance didn't stop there. Over the coming years, Kirby would be accused of molesting several young boys in multiple states. And in January 2007, Arkansas detectives arrived at Kirby's doorstep to confront him about these serious allegations. Knowing he was likely going to be arrested for child molestation, Kirby robbed the Batesville Walmart and fled the state just a few days after being interviewed by police. Then, using a series of fake names, Kirby made his way to South Florida, where he planned the next phase of his flight from justice, to escape the country entirely by fleeing to Cuba, a country with no extradition to the U.S. The prosecution's theory was simple. Kirby had hijacked the Joe Cool in order to escape charges of grand theft, as well as the impending charges of child molestation. Now that prosecutors had a solid theory of motive, they announced they'd seek the death penalty for the quadruple homicide aboard the Joe Cool. Up until this point, both Kirby and Guillermo had continued to maintain their innocence behind bars. But now that the death penalty was on the table, Kirby decided to make a deal with prosecutors. He agreed to plead guilty and offer a full confession in exchange for life without parole. According to Kirby, after fleeing Arkansas, he spent months hiding out in Miami with a Cuban family he'd met while stationed in Guantanamo Bay. During that time, he met Guillermo through a mutual friend and recruited him to help steal a boat and take it to Cuba. When they realized how difficult it would be to steal a boat from a marina, they switched to Plan B, which involved hijacking a chartered boat. On the day of the charter, both Kirby and Guillermo brought along 9mm handguns inside their luggage. According to Kirby, as the vessel neared Bimini, he shot Jake and Kelly on the top deck, while Guillermo executed Scott and Sammy in the cabin below. Kirby then took the helm and steered the boat toward Cuba at full throttle. Ultimately, his escape to Cuba was foiled when the Joe Cool ran out of gas. That's when they decided to hop into the boat's life raft, hoping it would be the Cuban authorities, not the U.S. Coast Guard, who would discover them first. It was during that dark night on the raft that the two murderers concocted their elaborate story about being hijacked. Despite Kirby's plea and confession, Guillermo continued to plead not guilty. Although he was now admitting the hijacking story was completely made up, he said when it came to the murders on board, it was all Kirby's doing. According to Guillermo, not only had he not participated in the murders, but he also claimed he had no idea it was even going to happen. Notably, Guillermo successfully passed 2 polygraph tests with detectives while revealing his side of the story. At Guillermo's trial in the fall of 2008, the prosecution successfully fought to rule the polygraph tests as inadmissible. Still, Guillermo's defense team presented the jury with an alternative version of events. Their version suggested that Guillermo had been duped by Kirby Archer into believing he was actually working for the CIA. And although this claim might sound ridiculous, much of this story was corroborated by a jailhouse informant who was ironically brought in to testify for the prosecution. The informant, who ran an illegal chop shop in Miami, claimed to be the one who introduced Kirby to Guillermo in the first place. And according to the informant, Kirby hadn't disclosed to either of them that he was a wanted fugitive in Arkansas. The informant also claimed that Kirby presented himself as a man connected with U.S. intelligence agencies and to have worked high-security jobs for several government officials. So when Kirby told Guillermo about a secret government mission to Cuba, Guillermo was gullible enough to believe it. He even told the informant that the job in Cuba would pay $1 million, and if Guillermo performed well, it would open up the possibility of future contracts with the CIA. According to him, the plan had always been to charter a boat to Bimini for a 2-week security job before going to Cuba. He brought along his gun, as he always did while working security. From there, they would make their way further south to embark on a secret mission for the CIA. There was never supposed to be any killing involved. Guillermo claimed that Kirby had executed all 4 crew members while Guillermo was inside the cabin using the bathroom. To counter Guillermo's story, the prosecution presented evidence that more than 2 firearms had been used during the murders. And if this were true, it would mean Guillermo was lying. They'd also found empty boxes of 9mm ammunition during a search of Guillermo's home, the exact same size and brand used during the murder. The defense contended that Guillermo had absolutely no motive to willingly take part in a murder conspiracy. He'd been a good kid all his life and wanted nothing more than to be an officer of the law one day. When the case was finally handed over to the jury, they spent days deliberating. Ultimately, the jury convicted Guillermo on firearms charges, but failed to agree on the murder charges, and eventually, a mistrial was declared. One of the jurors told the press, "I never believed for a minute that he was guilty of any of the charges." 3 jurors later came forward claiming they'd been bullied by another juror to return guilty verdicts. Another juror stated, "I was almost ready to change my verdict because I couldn't be screamed at anymore." Nevertheless, Guillermo was put on trial again a few months later. But this time, the prosecution secured a unanimous guilty verdict in all 4 homicides. There was just no getting past the fact that Guillermo had admitted to bringing his own gun, to being on the boat, and to assisting in the cover-up with Kirby after their rescue. So at just 20 years old, Guillermo was given a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the wake of the guilty verdict, Jake Branham's grandfather agreed with the verdict, but still expressed sympathy for Guillermo's family, saying, "I feel a lot of compassion for his parents. They've lost a son too."
At the UPS Store, we have the key to unlock the world of possibilities because we'll sign for your packages and protect them from porch pirates. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, pricing, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Come into your local store today.
As a nurse, have you ever wondered how much impact you could truly make? An impact that brings about real change? At Walden University, we graduate more nurses with advanced degrees than any other university in the U.S. We help assist you in finding the right fit for your practicum, giving you invaluable real-world experience. Because with the skills and confidence to create positive outcomes for your patients, you become the change.
Walden University, set a course for change.
The tragic events that unfolded aboard the Joe Cool have left a profound impact on everyone involved. In their grief, the Branham family expressed the depth of their loss at sentencing, saying, "Jake was a hero. He saved many lives over the years. You are a coward. You chose to take innocent lives. You are a monster, and society must protect us from you." The loss of Captain Jake, his wife Kelly, and crewmates Scott Gamble and Sammy Carey has forever altered the lives of their families. Particularly heart-wrenching is the fate of Jake and Kelly's children, who were left orphaned without parents. Thankfully, they found a loving home with Kelly's sister in Michigan, where they were raised with care and compassion. Amy Gamble, Jake's sister, articulated the family's enduring pain. "I didn't just lose 2 brothers. I lost 2 protectors. My family has been destroyed by their deaths. There will always be a missing piece in us." To this day, the victims' bodies have never been recovered. Follow the Minds of Madness on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To support the show and get access to ad-free episodes, extra content, and Patreon-exclusive episodes, go to patreon.com/madnesspod. To find us on Instagram and Facebook, search The Minds of Madness, and on Twitter using the handle @madnesspod. And also, by checking out our sponsors and using our promo codes, you're also helping support the show. We've got all the links in our episode notes. So until next week, thanks for listening.
As a nurse, have you ever wondered how much impact you could truly make? An impact that brings about real change? At Walden University, we graduate more nurses with advanced degrees than any other university in the U.S. We help assist you in finding the right fit for your practicum, giving you invaluable real-world experience. Because with the skills and confidence to create positive outcomes for your patients, you become the change.
Walden University. Set a course for change.
Oregonians, did you know that there are everyday actions you can take to keep energy reliable and your electricity costs down? Find your best cost-saving options with PGE's new home energy analysis tool, or enroll in free energy shifting programs for rebates and savings. PGE is committed to keeping your power flowing and costs as low as possible. Visit portlandgeneral.com/takeaction and save.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.